fate has a twisted sense of humor, then mine is downright cruel. Of all the nights for the office doors to jam shut, it had to be tonight, with me locked inside with the most terrifying woman I had ever met, me boss. And not just any boss. Miranda Hayes, the kind of CEO who could silence a room with a single glance and make grown men sweat with a raised brow. The woman I had admired from afar but also feared with every bone in my body. The storm outside was relentless, beating against the windows with the kind of fury that matched the storm inside me. I was the lowly assistant who'd stayed late to finish paperwork, and she was the ice queen who never left before midnight. Now we were stuck together, the two of us breathing the same recycled air, surrounded by towering glass walls that suddenly felt more like a cage than an office. Miranda sat at her desk, calm as ever, fingers moving across her laptop with that intimidating grace. I couldn't help but notice the way her sharp jawline caught the golden light, how her perfectly tailored suit hugged her frame. She was beautiful in a way that made you feel unworthy, like staring at art you weren't allowed to touch. "Stop staring and make yourself useful," she said without looking up. Her voice was cool, detached, but there was an edge there, like she had noticed my gaze and decided not to let it slide. I flushed instantly, fumbling with the stack of reports in my arms. "Sorry. I was just what?" She finally looked at me, her eyes locking onto mine with a force that made my knees weak. "Just making sure everything's in order." Her lips curved, but not in a smile. It was something sharper, almost mocking. "You're terrible at lying, you know that?" And just like that, the silence between us grew heavier. I hated that she could see right through me. I hated that she had this power over me. And most of all, I hated that some part of me liked it. Hours dragged by. The storm didn't let up. Security had gone home, and the building system wasn't responding. Miranda finally shut her laptop and leaned back, sighing in frustration. It was the first human sound I'd heard from her all night. She wasn't the flawless CEO in that moment, she was just a woman stuck in a glass tower, tired and maybe a little lonely. "Guess we're not leaving anytime soon," she muttered. Something inside me stirred at the vulnerability in her voice. I'd spent months watching her from a distance, painting her as untouchable. But here in the quiet of a storm, she felt almost within reach. "Maybe it's not the worst thing," I said before I could stop myself. Her brows shot up. "Being locked in with your boss? You must have a strange definition of fun." I swallowed hard, my courage faltering. But the words were already out, so I pushed further. "I just mean, it's rare to actually talk to you. Without the meetings, the deadlines, the walls." Miranda tilted her head, studying me like I was a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to solve. Then, to my utter shock, she laughed. It was low, husky, and it made my chest tighten. "Walls are necessary," she said softly. "People don't need to know everything about you. But sometimes walls keep out the wrong people," I replied, almost in a whisper. Her gaze lingered on me then, longer than it ever had before. There was something in her eyes, hesitation, conflict, maybe even longing. And suddenly the room felt smaller, the air warmer. Every inch of space between us felt electric. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the storm, maybe it was the late hour. Maybe it was the way her armor seemed to crack just enough for me to glimpse the woman underneath. But I stepped closer, my hands trembling slightly. She didn't move away. In fact, when I brushed my fingers against hers, testing the fragile line between professional and personal, she didn't pull back. Her hand was warm, her skin softer than I'd imagined, and in that single touch I felt something shift. Her lips parted, a flicker of surprise crossing her face, but she didn't stop me. If anything, she leaned in, as though my courage had given her permission she never allowed herself. For the first time, Miranda Hayes wasn't the cold CEO, or the untouchable woman on the pedestal. She was human, and she was right there in front of me, letting me touch a piece of her heart she'd kept hidden from the world. And I knew then that this night was going to change everything. Her breath was shallow, and so was mine. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain outside and the low hum of electricity from the ceiling lights. Then, as if realizing how close we were, Miranda pulled back slightly. Her eyes narrowed, but I could see the cracks forming in that perfect mask of hers. "This is a mistake," she whispered, though her hand still lingered against mine. "Then why aren't you letting go?" My voice shook, but I didn't regret the words. Something flickered across her face, fear, longing, maybe both. She finally let out a soft, humorless laugh. You have no idea what you're getting into. I don't do this. You don't do feelings? Or you don't do people? Her silence was the answer. For a while she walked to the window, staring out at the storm as though searching for escape. I stayed where I was, heart pounding. I knew I had crossed a line, but I also knew there was no going back. When she finally turned to me, her face looked tired, more than I'd ever seen. People expect me to be perfect, she said. Cold. In control. Do you know what happens if I let someone in? They leave. Or worse, they use it against me. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening at the loneliness in her words. I'm not them, Miranda. I'm not here to hurt you. Her lips pressed together. She didn't answer, but the wall she had built seemed to tremble. Slowly, I walked toward her, close enough that I could see the faint lines of exhaustion under her eyes. You don't always have to be strong, I murmured. Something broke then. Maybe it was the storm. Maybe it was the hours of silence, the weight of unspoken truths. Or maybe she was just tired of carrying the world alone. Whatever it was, Miranda reached for me first. Her hand cupped my cheek, cool and trembling, and then her lips found mine. The kiss wasn't polished or practiced at, it was desperate, raw, full of years of restraint finally unraveling. I melted into it, my arms wrapping around her, holding her as though I could anchor her to this moment. When she pulled back, her forehead rested against mine. You're reckless, she whispered. And you're lonely, I replied. She laughed softly, shaking her head, but she didn't move away. For the first time she looked at me not as an employee, not as a subordinate, but as someone who had slipped past her defenses. The storm raged on outside, but inside the air grew warmer, softer. We talked through the night about her childhood in Chicago, about my silly college dreams, about everything in between. The hours slipped away, and with each confession, I saw the woman beneath the steel exterior. Vulnerable, human, beautiful. By the time the storm ended and the office doors finally clicked open, dawn light spilling into the glass tower, I knew something had changed. She stood at the threshold, pausing as if unsure. The CEO mask was returning. I could see it settling back into place. But before she walked out, she looked at me and whispered, "Don't make me regret this." I smiled, my chest swelling with a strange mix of fear and hope. I won't. Days turned into weeks. At first, nothing seemed different. Meetings were still sharp, deadlines still merciless. But behind closed doors, small things shifted. Her hand would brush mine during late nights. She would soften when we were alone, letting me see pieces of her no one else ever could. It wasn't easy. Some nights she shut me out, convinced she was better off alone. Other nights she pulled me close, holding me like she was terrified I'd vanish. But through the struggles, through the fear and hesitation, I stayed. And slowly Miranda learned how to stay too. The woman everyone else knew as cold and untouchable was, in truth, full of warmth she didn't know how to give. And I, just an ordinary assistant who stumbled into her storm, became the person she chose to trust. Months later, we stood together on that same office floor, the city lights glittering around us. The storm had passed long ago, but the memory of that night lingered between us, like a secret no one else could touch. She reached for my hand openly this time, no hesitation, no fear. "You really did touch my heart," she said quietly, almost like she still couldn't believe it herself. "And you let me," I replied, smiling through the lump in my throat. For the first time since I'd met her, Miranda Hayes didn't look like a distant goddess carved from ice. She looked like a woman standing beside me, no walls between us. And in that moment, with the world glittering beyond the glass walls, I realized something simple and extraordinary. Love doesn't always arrive gently. Sometimes it crashes in like a storm, trapping you in impossible places. But if you're brave enough to reach through the fear, you just might find the heart you were never supposed to touch. And once you do, nothing will ever be the same. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.